A single father threw himself in front of a speeding bullet, his body becoming a shield for an innocent girl he didn't even know. In that split second of sacrifice, he had no idea this heroic act would unleash a deadly war across the peaceful countryside. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The sun was setting over Meadowbrook Valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The small farming community had always been peaceful, a place where neighbors helped each other and children played freely in the fields. But that evening, everything was about to change forever. Daniel Harper was a simple man with a complicated past. He had lost his wife Sarah 3 years ago to cancer, leaving him alone to raise their 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Every morning, Daniel would wake up at dawn, make Emma's breakfast, braid her hair the way Sarah used to, and then head to work at the local construction site. His hands were rough and calloused, but they were gentle when they held his daughter close. Money was always tight. Daniel worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. He fixed cars at night in his small garage, saving every penny for Emma's future. The neighbors often saw him walking Emma to school, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger, both of them smiling despite their struggles. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," Emma had said one morning, her eyes bright with innocence. Daniel had knelt down, touching her cheek softly. "No, sweetheart. You're going to be better than me. You're going to do amazing things." Life was hard, but they had each other, and that was enough. On the other side of Meadowbrook lived the Morrison family. Thomas Morrison owned the largest farm in the valley, hundreds of acres of golden wheat and corn that stretched as far as the eye could see. He was a good man, respected by everyone, and he had a daughter named Rachel who was 17 years old. Rachel Morrison was beautiful, with long brown hair and kind eyes that reminded people of her late mother. She helped her father run the farm, waking up before sunrise to feed the animals and tend to the crops. Despite her wealthy background, Rachel was humble and caring. She often volunteered at the local church, helping families in need. But wealth attracts danger, and the Morrison farm had become a target. The trouble started 6 months ago when Victor Kane moved into the area. Victor was a ruthless businessman who wanted to buy up all the farmland in Meadowbrook Valley to build factories and shopping centers. He had made Thomas Morrison several offers, each more aggressive than the last. "This land has been in my family for 4 generations, Thomas had told Victor firmly. "It's not for sale." Victor's eyes had turned cold. "Everything has a price, Morrison. You'll learn that soon enough." When words didn't work, Victor turned to threats. Strange things began happening on the Morrison farm. Fences were cut, animals went missing, and equipment was sabotaged. Thomas reported everything to the local sheriff, but there was never enough evidence to arrest anyone. Rachel began to feel afraid. She noticed men in dark cars watching the farm from the road. Sometimes, when she was alone in the barn, she felt eyes on her. Her father hired security guards, but Victor's men were patient and clever. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a Saturday evening, and Daniel had promised to take Emma to the county fair. Emma had been talking about it for weeks, excited about the rides and cotton candy. Daniel had saved up money for this special day, wanting to see his daughter's face light up with joy. "Can we ride the Ferris wheel, Daddy?" Emma asked, bouncing in her seat as they drove down the country road. "We can ride it twice if you want," Daniel laughed, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. The fairgrounds were near the Morrison farm, and as Daniel drove past the property, he noticed something strange. A black van was parked on the side of the road, and several men were standing near the Morrisons' fence, looking toward the farmhouse with binoculars. Daniel's instincts kicked in. Something felt wrong. He had served in the military before Emma was born, and he recognized the way these men moved. They weren't just watching, they were planning something. He pulled over and called the local sheriff's office, but the line was busy. Daniel sat in his truck, torn between continuing to the fair and checking on what was happening. Emma was so excited about the fair, but his gut told him something bad was about to happen. "Daddy, why did we stop?" Emma asked. Before Daniel could answer, he saw a teenage girl walking alone on the Morrison property. It was Rachel, carrying a basket of vegetables from the garden. She was completely unaware that she was being watched. Then Daniel saw one of the men pull out a gun. Time seemed to slow down. Daniel's heart raced as he realized what was about to happen. These men weren't just trying to scare the Morrisons anymore. They were going to hurt Rachel. "Emma, stay in the truck," Daniel said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Lock the doors and don't come out no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" Emma's eyes widened with fear. "Daddy, what's wrong? Just promise me, sweetheart. Stay here." Daniel jumped out of the truck and ran toward the Morrison property. His legs pumped hard as he crossed the field. Rachel was still walking, humming softly to herself, completely oblivious to the danger closing in on her. The men had climbed over the fence now and were moving through the tall corn stalks, getting closer to Rachel with every step. Daniel could see the leader raising his gun, aiming at the young girl. "Rachel! Get down!" Daniel shouted at the top of his lungs. Rachel turned, confused, her eyes searching for the source of the voice. In that moment, the gunman fired. Daniel threw himself forward with every ounce of strength he had. His body collided with Rachel, pushing her to the ground just as the bullet left the gun's barrel. He felt a searing pain explode through his shoulder as the bullet tore through his flesh. They hit the ground hard, Daniel's body covering Rachel's, protecting her from any more shots. The pain was intense, radiating through his entire body, but Daniel stayed focused. He had to keep Rachel safe. "Stay down," he whispered to her, his voice strained. More gunshots rang out. The men were running toward them now, shouting to each other. Daniel could hear Rachel crying beneath him, terrified and confused. Thomas Morrison came running from the farmhouse, his own rifle in his hands. "Get away from my daughter," he roared, firing a warning shot into the air. The attackers hesitated. They hadn't expected resistance, hadn't expected someone to interfere with their plan. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Someone had called the police. "Let's go," one of the men shouted, and they ran back toward their van, disappearing into the evening shadows. Thomas reached Daniel and Rachel, his face pale with fear. "Rachel. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, Daddy," Rachel sobbed. "But he's bleeding. He saved me. This man saved my life." Daniel rolled onto his back, his hand pressed against his wounded shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, warm and sticky. The pain was overwhelming, but all he could think about was Emma. "My daughter," Daniel gasped. "My truck. She's waiting for me." Thomas immediately understood. "We'll get her. Just hold on." Rachel took off her sweater and pressed it against Daniel's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Tears streamed down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do that. You could have been killed." Daniel managed a weak smile. "Couldn't just watch them hurt you." The ambulance arrived within minutes, along with police cars. The paramedics rushed to Daniel's side, quickly assessing his injury. Thomas ran to Daniel's truck and found Emma, still locked inside, her face pressed against the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daddy!" Emma screamed when Thomas opened the door. "Your father is a hero," Thomas said gently, lifting the little girl into his arms. "He's hurt, but the doctors are going to help him. You can see him soon." At the hospital, doctors worked frantically to save Daniel's life. The bullet had missed his heart by inches but had caused severe damage to his shoulder. Emma sat in the waiting room with Thomas and Rachel, her small body shaking with fear. "Is my daddy going to die?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Rachel knelt down in front of the little girl, taking her hands. "Your daddy is the bravest man I've ever met. He's a fighter, and he's going to be okay. I promise. Hours passed like years. Finally, a doctor emerged from the operating room. He's stable. The surgery went well. He'll need a lot of recovery time, but he's going to make it. Emma burst into tears of relief, and Rachel held her close. Thomas stood with his hand on Rachel's shoulder, his own eyes wet with tears. A stranger had risked his life to save his daughter, and Thomas Morrison was not a man who forgot deaths. The next morning, the entire story spread through Meadowbrook Valley like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the single father who had taken a bullet to save the farmer's daughter. People came to the hospital with flowers, food, and offers of help. But the story was far from over. Victor Kane heard about the failed attack and was furious. His men had been sloppy, and now the police were investigating. But Victor was powerful and had connections everywhere. Within 2 days, all his men were released on bail, and the investigation seemed to lose momentum. Thomas Morrison was outraged. He went to the sheriff's office demanding justice, but the sheriff, a tired old man named Bill Crawford, just shook his head. I know Victor Kane is behind this, Thomas, but I don't have enough evidence to arrest him. His lawyers are good. Real good. Without solid proof, my hands are tied. A man nearly died protecting my daughter. Thomas shouted. Those men shot at us on my own property. And we're investigating, Sheriff Crawford said wearily. But investigations take time. Thomas left the office frustrated and angry. He knew the truth. Victor Kane had enough money to make problems disappear, to pay off the right people, to walk free while good people suffered. Meanwhile, Daniel was recovering in the hospital. His shoulder would never be the same. The doctors told him he would have limited mobility, and the kind of heavy construction work he did would be impossible now. One bullet had destroyed his ability to earn a living. Emma visited him every day after school, sitting by his bedside, holding his hand. She had stopped smiling. The light in her eyes had dimmed. She had seen her father bleeding, had heard the gunshots, and the trauma had changed something inside her. I'm sorry, baby girl, Daniel whispered one evening, tears running down his face. I'm sorry I scared you. You're a hero, Daddy, Emma said quietly. Everyone says so. Heroes don't cry, Daniel tried to joke. Yes, they do, Emma replied, wiping away his tears. Because heroes have the biggest hearts, and big hearts feel everything more. Daniel pulled his daughter close with his good arm, and they cried together. Thomas Morrison came to visit Daniel every single day. He brought food, paid Daniel's hospital bills, and made sure Emma had everything she needed. But Thomas could see the worry in Daniel's eyes, the fear about the future. What am I going to do? Daniel confided in Thomas one evening. I can't work construction anymore. I can't fix cars with one arm barely working. I have a daughter to support, bills to pay. I'm useless now. You listen to me, Thomas said firmly, his voice filled with emotion. You are not useless. You saved my daughter's life. You threw yourself in front of a bullet without hesitation. That makes you the finest man I've ever known. That doesn't pay the bills, Daniel said bitterly. Then I will, Thomas declared. You're going to come work on my farm. I need a manager, someone I can trust. The pay is good, and there's a cottage on the property where you and Emma can live. No rent. Daniel stared at him, overwhelmed. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's a job. And it's the least I can do for the man who saved my daughter's life. Tears filled Daniel's eyes. Why? You don't even know me. I know enough, Thomas said. I know you're a good father. I know you're brave. I know you put others before yourself. That's all I need to know. 2 weeks later, Daniel was released from the hospital. Thomas Morrison was there with his truck to take Daniel and Emma to their new home. The cottage was small but beautiful, with 2 bedrooms, a cozy fireplace, and a porch that overlooked the fields. Emma ran through the house, her laughter echoing for the first time in weeks. "Daddy, look! I have my own room. And there's a swing outside." Daniel stood on the porch, watching his daughter play, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Rachel came by that evening with fresh baked bread and homemade soup. She had visited Daniel in the hospital several times, and a friendship had grown between them. "How are you settling in?" Rachel asked, setting the food on the kitchen table. "It's perfect," Daniel said. "Your father is too generous." "No," Rachel said firmly. "You earned this. You saved my life." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Rachel spoke again, her voice soft. "Those men, they're still out there. Victor Kane is still trying to take our farm." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Has there been more trouble?" "Small things, threatening phone calls, men watching the property. My father tries to hide it from me, but I know he's scared." Daniel looked out the window at the peaceful farmland. This place had given him and Emma a second chance. These people had shown him kindness when he had nothing. And now they were in danger. "I won't let anything happen to you or your father," Daniel said quietly. Rachel looked at him with grateful eyes. "You've already done so much." "Not enough," Daniel replied. Over the next few months, Daniel threw himself into his new job. Despite his injured shoulder, he learned quickly and worked hard. He managed the farm workers, organized harvest schedules, and helped Thomas with the business side of running the farm. Emma flourished in her new environment. She made friends with the children of the farm workers, played in the fields, and her laughter returned. She grew close to Rachel, who became like a big sister to her. Daniel and Rachel spent a lot of time together, working side by side. Rachel taught Daniel about farming, and Daniel shared stories about his life, his late wife, and his dreams for Emma's future. Slowly, something beautiful began to grow between them. It wasn't just gratitude or friendship anymore. It was something deeper. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rachel spoke softly. "Sarah must have been an amazing woman." "She was," Daniel said, his voice filled with love and sadness. "She was the best person I ever knew." "Emma is lucky to have had her as a mother," Rachel said. "And lucky to have you as a father." Daniel turned to look at Rachel, really look at her. She was beautiful, kind, and strong. "I never thought I could feel anything for anyone after Sarah died," he admitted. "But being around you, it's different. You make me feel like maybe there's room in my heart for something new." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I feel the same way. But I don't want to replace her memory." "You wouldn't be replacing anything," Daniel said, reaching for her hand. "Sarah would want me to be happy. She would want Emma to have love in her life. And you've given us both so much already." They sat there, hands intertwined, as the sun dipped below the horizon. But their happiness was short-lived. Victor Kane was not the type of man to give up. He had lost the element of surprise, but he hadn't lost his determination to take over the Morrison farm. He hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Thomas Morrison, looking for anything he could use as leverage. When that didn't work, Victor changed tactics. He couldn't attack the Morrisons directly anymore, not without drawing more attention from the law. So instead, he decided to go after the farm itself. One night, a fire broke out in the main barn. By the time anyone noticed, flames were already consuming the structure. Daniel woke up to the smell of smoke and the sound of animals screaming. He burst out of the cottage and ran toward the barn, his heart pounding. Thomas and Rachel were already there, desperately trying to open the gates to let the horses and cows escape. "We need water," Thomas shouted. Daniel grabbed a hose and started spraying the flames, but it was too little, too late. The barn was already engulfed. All they could do was save the animals and watch as years of hard work burned to the ground. By the time the fire department arrived, the barn was completely destroyed. The fire chief examined the scene and found evidence of arson. Someone had deliberately set the fire. Thomas Morrison stood in front of the smoking ruins, his face gray with despair. This barn had been built by his grandfather. It held so many memories, and now it was gone. This was Victor Kane, Thomas said quietly. I know it was him. Then we go to the police, Daniel said. With what proof? Thomas asked bitterly. Kane is smart. He never does his own dirty work. We'll never be able to prove he was behind this. Daniel felt rage building inside him. These good people had given him and Emma everything, and now they were being terrorized by a greedy man who only cared about money. There has to be something we can do, Daniel said. Rachel touched his arm gently. Sometimes bad people win. Sometimes there's no justice. No, Daniel said firmly. I don't accept that. Over the next few weeks, more incidents occurred. Equipment was vandalized, crops were contaminated with pesticides, and threatening letters arrived at the farmhouse. Thomas tried to stay strong, but the stress was wearing him down. He began to look older, more tired. One evening, a lawyer showed up at the farm with papers. Victor Kane was suing Thomas Morrison, claiming that the Morrison farm was violating environmental regulations. The lawsuit was bogus, but it would cost thousands of dollars to fight in court. He's trying to bankrupt us, Thomas explained to Daniel that night. Even if we win, the legal fees will destroy us. We'll have to sell the farm just to pay the lawyers. Daniel sat in silence, his mind racing. There had to be a way to stop Victor Kane. There had to be justice. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about the bullet that had torn through his shoulder, about Emma's frightened face, about the barn burning, about Thomas Morrison's defeated expression. And then he thought about his time in the military, about the skills he had learned, about the men he had served with who knew how to find information that others couldn't. Daniel made a decision. The next morning, he made some phone calls. He reached out to old friends from his military days, men he hadn't spoken to in years. He explained the situation and asked for help. You're talking about going after a powerful man, one of his old friends warned. That's dangerous, Danny. I know, Daniel replied. But these people saved my life and my daughter's life. I can't just stand by and watch them lose everything. His friend was quiet for a moment. Give me a week. I'll see what I can find. While Daniel waited, life on the farm continued. Rachel could sense that Daniel was planning something, but she didn't ask questions. She trusted him. Emma was thriving. She loved living on the farm, loved her new school, and loved spending time with Rachel. One afternoon, she came running to Daniel with flowers in her hands. Daddy! Look what Miss Rachel taught me to grow. Daniel knelt down and admired the flowers. They're beautiful, sweetheart. Miss Rachel is beautiful too, Emma said innocently. Don't you think so? Daniel smiled. Yes, I do. I think she loves you, Daddy. And I think you love her too. Daniel was surprised by his daughter's perception. You're a smart girl. So it's okay if you love her? Emma asked. Even though we still love Mommy? Daniel pulled Emma into a hug, tears stinging his eyes. Yes, baby. We'll always love Mommy. But she would want us to be happy. And Miss Rachel makes us happy, doesn't she? Emma nodded enthusiastically. She makes the best cookies. They both laughed. A week later, Daniel's friend called back. I've got something. Victor Kane isn't as clean as he pretends to be. He's involved in some shady business deals, tax evasion, and get this, he's been bribing local officials, including your sheriff. Daniel's blood ran cold. Sheriff Crawford is on Kane's payroll. Has been for years. That's why nothing ever sticks to Kane. The sheriff makes sure investigations go nowhere. Can you prove it? I've got bank records, emails, recorded phone conversations. It's all here. Take it to the state police, not the local guys. They'll have to act on this. Daniel felt a surge of hope. Finally, they had something real, something that could stop Victor Kane. That evening, Daniel gathered Thomas and Rachel in the farmhouse and explained everything. He showed them the evidence his friend had collected. Thomas stared at the documents, his hands shaking. This is it. This can destroy Kane. And Sheriff Crawford, Rachel added. We need to be careful, Daniel warned. If Kane finds out we have this information before we can get it to the state police, he might try something desperate. They decided to act quickly. The next morning, Daniel drove to the state capitol with all the evidence. He met with state investigators and laid everything out. They were shocked by what they saw. This is serious, one investigator said. We'll open an immediate investigation into both Victor Kane and Sheriff Crawford. How long until you can arrest them? Daniel asked. We need to verify everything first, but if this evidence holds up, we're talking days, not weeks. Daniel drove back to Meadowbrook Valley feeling lighter than he had in months. Justice was finally coming. But Victor Kane had eyes and ears everywhere. One of his people at the state capitol saw Daniel leaving the investigator's office and reported back immediately. Kane went into a rage. He knew his empire was about to crumble. All his money, all his power, all his plans were falling apart. And it was all because of that single father who had interfered months ago. That evening, as the sun was setting, Victor Kane made a decision. If he was going down, he would take Thomas Morrison down with him. And he would make sure Daniel Harper paid for destroying everything. Kane gathered his most loyal men, the ones who had done his dirtiest work over the years. I want the Morrison farm burned to the ground, he ordered. I want everyone there to understand what happens when people cross me. His men drove out to the farm under the cover of darkness. They parked their vehicles a mile away and approached on foot, carrying gasoline and weapons. But they didn't know that Daniel Harper had been expecting something like this. Daniel had learned in the military to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that Kane would strike back before the police could arrest him. So Daniel had set up a watch system. He and several of the farm workers took turns patrolling the property at night. When Daniel saw flashlights moving through the fields, he knew immediately what was happening. He woke Thomas and Rachel quietly. They're here. Call the state police, tell them we need help now. What are you going to do? Thomas asked. I'm going to protect this farm, Daniel said, his voice hard. He grabbed Thomas's hunting rifle and headed outside. His shoulder ached, but he pushed through the pain. Several of the farm workers joined him, good men who weren't afraid to defend their home. They positioned themselves strategically around the farmhouse and barns, waiting in the darkness. Victor Kane's men moved closer, unaware they were walking into a trap. They had gasoline cans and planned to set fire to everything, the house, the barns, the crops. But before they could light the first match, Daniel stepped out of the shadows. That's far enough, he said, pointing the rifle at them. The men froze. There were 6 of them, and they were all armed. You're the one who took the bullet, one of them said, recognizing Daniel. You should have minded your own business. This is my business now, Daniel replied. These people are my family. Then you'll die with them, the man said, reaching for his gun. Everything happened in a blur. Daniel fired a warning shot into the ground, and chaos erupted. Kane's men scattered, some trying to run, others pulling out their weapons. The farm workers rushed forward, tackling several of the men. Fists flew, gunshots rang out. Daniel moved with precision, using his military training to disarm one man and knock another unconscious. Rachel had ignored her father's orders to stay inside. She grabbed a shovel and hit one of Cain's men who was trying to light a fire. The gasoline can spilled, but no fire started. Thomas fought with a strength born of desperation, protecting his home and his daughter. The battle was fierce but short. Within minutes, all of Cain's men were subdued, tied up with rope, and sitting on the ground with their hands behind their backs. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The state police were coming, and they were bringing half the department with them. Daniel stood over the captured men, his injured shoulder screaming in pain, his body exhausted. But he had won. They had all won. When the state police arrived, they found Victor Cain's men surrounded and defeated. The police arrested all of them on the spot. One of the investigators walked up to Daniel. "We've been trying to catch these guys for years. You just handed us the entire operation." Within hours, Victor Cain was arrested at his mansion. The news spread like wildfire through Meadowbrook Valley. The man who had terrorized so many families was finally in handcuffs. Sheriff Crawford was arrested the next morning, charged with corruption and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. The trial took months, but the outcome was never in doubt. Victor Cain was convicted on multiple charges: attempted murder, arson, bribery, extortion, and conspiracy. The judge gave him 30 years in prison. His empire fell apart. All his properties were seized, and the land he had tried to steal was returned to the rightful owners. Meadowbrook Valley was finally free. Life on the Morrison farm slowly returned to normal. The barn was rebuilt, this time even better than before. The crops grew tall and strong. The animals thrived. Daniel's shoulder healed as much as it ever would. He would always have limited mobility, but he had learned to adapt. He continued to manage the farm, and under his leadership, it became more successful than ever. Emma grew into a bright, happy child. She was the top student in her class and loved spending time on the farm. She had overcome the trauma of that terrible day and had grown stronger because of it. One evening, as spring turned to summer, Daniel walked through the fields with Rachel by his side. They had grown closer over the months, their friendship blossoming into something beautiful. "I have something to tell you," Rachel said, her voice nervous. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "What is it?" "I love you," Rachel said simply. "I've loved you since the day you saved my life. I know it's complicated, I know you have Emma to think about, but I couldn't keep it inside anymore." Daniel felt his heart swell with emotion. He took Rachel's hands in his. "I love you too. I've been afraid to say it, afraid it meant I was forgetting Sarah. But I realize now that love doesn't replace love. It adds to it. My heart has room for both Sarah's memory and for you." They kissed as the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in brilliant colors. 3 months later, Daniel proposed to Rachel on the same porch where they had first held hands. Emma was there, jumping up and down with excitement, holding the ring box. "Will you marry my daddy?" Emma asked Rachel, her eyes shining. Rachel laughed through her tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They were married in the fall, in a simple ceremony in the field surrounded by friends and neighbors. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a beautiful white dress, and Thomas walked Rachel down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. The entire community came to celebrate. Daniel Harper, the single father who had taken a bullet to save a stranger, was now surrounded by love and family. As Daniel stood at the altar watching Rachel walk toward him, he thought about everything that had happened. He thought about the darkest moments, losing Sarah, being shot, nearly losing everything. But he also thought about the light that had come after the darkness, Emma's laughter, Thomas's kindness, Rachel's love. Life had tested him in the cruelest ways, but he had survived. He had protected the people he loved, and in doing so, he had found a new purpose, a new family, a new life. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, you're crying." Daniel wiped his eyes and smiled. These are happy tears, sweetheart. I know, Emma said wisely. Because heroes feel everything more, remember? Daniel picked up his daughter and held her close, then reached out to take Rachel's hand. They were a family now. Not perfect, but real. Not without scars, but stronger because of them. And as the sun set over Meadowbrook Valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Daniel Harper knew that he was finally home. The single father who had taken a bullet had gained everything worth having. Years later, people still talked about that day. They talked about the bravery, the sacrifice, the love that conquered evil. And whenever someone asked Daniel if he regretted throwing himself in front of that bullet, he would smile and say, "That was the moment my real life began." And he meant every word.